This is a true story. In 1991, two Soviet cosmonauts were completely abandoned and forgotten on a space station. With the Earth right before their eyes, they were trapped in the dark void, unable to return home. When their supplies were running dangerously low, a sudden opportunity to return to Earth presented itself. But faced with this single glimmer of hope, the two men adamantly refused. What exactly happened up there? Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. Today, I am going to take you on a journey into the cold, isolated depths of the cosmos to tell you about the lonely, forgotten cosmonauts of the former Soviet Union. Our story begins on May 18, 1991. On that day, the Soyuz TM-12 spacecraft successfully blasted off into the sky, heading straight for the Mir space station. This massive structure was a space station independently operated by the Soviet Union. Aboard the spacecraft were 3 crew members. The team included the mission commander, Anatoly, who led the expedition, alongside Krikalev, who served as the flight engineer. Joining them was a British female astronaut named Helen Sharman. You might wonder why a British citizen was on a Soviet mission. The reality was that a private British corporation had sponsored this specific flight. In exchange for their financial backing, they secured a highly coveted ticket to space, making Helen essentially a commercial passenger on this historic journey. For Anatoly and Krikalev, the mission was incredibly demanding and fraught with heavy responsibilities. Their primary tasks included installing and maintaining critical equipment inside the aging space station, as well as conducting various scientific experiments to test how different materials performed in the harsh environment of outer space. Additionally, they were scheduled to perform 6 extremely dangerous spacewalks. During these extravehicular activities, they had to install structural trusses, maintain external life support equipment, and complete numerous technical evaluations. To complete this grueling checklist of tasks, the two men were scheduled to live aboard the space station for 5 long months. Helen Sharman, on the other hand, was there primarily for the experience. Because her seat was purchased, her stay was short, and she was scheduled to return to Earth after just 1 week. At exactly 12:50 p.m. that day, the countdown reached 0, and the Soyuz TM-12 roared into the heavens. After dozens of hours of spaceflight and a tense docking procedure, the 3 astronauts successfully floated into the Mir space station. The moment she entered, Helen was absolutely mesmerized. Staring out through the observation window, she saw the infinite dark abyss of deep space contrasted by the breathtaking, vibrant blue Earth right before her eyes. It felt so close, as if she could just reach out and touch the planet. As an ordinary person experiencing a sight few will ever see, she was overwhelmed with emotion. Suddenly, a blinding, brilliant golden light flooded the entire station. At that exact moment, the space station had flown out of the Earth's shadow and directly into the path of the sun's rays. The sheer visual shock of that sudden illumination was beyond words, leaving her covered in goosebumps. After a week of awe-inspiring views, Helen returned to Earth as planned. The station was now left to just Anatoly and Krikalev, who settled into their grueling 5-month routine. Time flew by, and soon 4.5 months had passed. With their scheduled return date rapidly approaching, the two men were in high spirits, humming cheerful tunes as they worked. But one day, the ground control center suddenly contacted them with unexpected news. Due to unforeseen technical issues, the upcoming return flight could only accommodate 1 person. The other cosmonaut would have to remain on the space station for an additional 1 or 2 months. The ground control assured them that the current supplies would temporarily be sufficient. As for who would return, the center instructed the two men to discuss it amongst themselves based on the station's operational needs. Once they made a decision, they were to send a signal, and a replacement would be sent up to take over for the departing crew member. Being a kind-hearted man, Krikalev immediately turned to his commander. He told Anatoly to go back first, reminding him that his wife had just given birth to a child, and he needed to go home to his family. Anatoly felt embarrassed, arguing that as the commander, it was his duty to stay behind and let his crewmate return. But Krikalev brushed it off, assuring him that staying an extra month or 2 was no big deal. And just like that, the decision was made. Little did Krikalev know, the extra time he volunteered for would not be just 1 or 2 months. His journey back to Earth was about to become an unimaginably agonizing ordeal. On October 2nd of that year, the replacement astronaut, Volkov, arrived aboard the Soyuz TM-13 spacecraft, successfully docking with the Mir station. After completing the necessary handovers, Anatoly boarded the return vessel and headed back to Earth. This seemed like a standard personnel rotation. Neither Krikalev nor Volkov had any idea that down on Earth, their homeland was undergoing a catastrophic, earth-shattering upheaval. Floating in the silent vacuum of space, they were completely oblivious to the geopolitical earthquake happening below. By the time November rolled around, Krikalev had still not received his official orders to return home. He started to feel a growing sense of unease. What was going on? Why hadn't they notified him? Even if his stay was extended again, standard protocol dictated they inform him. It felt as if he had been entirely forgotten. By this point, Krikalev had been living on the space station for over 160 days, far exceeding his original 5-month mission. It was then that the two cosmonauts realized a terrifying truth. The ground control center hadn't contacted them or issued any commands in a very long time. They had been so absorbed in their daily maintenance tasks that the silence had gone unnoticed. Panic setting in, Krikalev rushed to the communication console and desperately tried to hail ground control. But all he heard was dead silence. No matter how many times he called out, there was absolutely no response from the Earth below. Panicked, Krikalev turned to Volkov, who had arrived most recently, and asked if he had noticed anything unusual or problematic before he launched. Volkov scratched his head, thinking hard, and replied that everything had seemed completely normal. Then he paused, a dark thought crossing his mind. Could the Americans have attacked? He wondered aloud. Given the intense paranoia of the Cold War era, it was a terrifying but plausible assumption. Krikalev was stunned, but Volkov quickly backtracked, saying he was just guessing, as there were no signs of war when he left. With no answers and no way to force a connection, another agonizing month passed in silence. One day, while Krikalev was repairing a broken signal light, the radio suddenly crackled to life. Static filled the module, followed by a signal. Overjoyed by the sudden noise, Krikalev pushed off the wall, floating rapidly toward the console in the zero-gravity environment. As he got closer, a male voice echoed through the speaker, asking 3 simple words. "Is anyone there?" Hearing the commotion, Volkov rushed over, and both men huddled around the radio. Krikalev, trembling with excitement, replied, "This is the Mir space station. I am Krikalev." But the response from the other end left them absolutely paralyzed with shock. The man introduced himself as an engineer from the United States National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The two cosmonauts were utterly bewildered. Why was an American patching into their secure frequency? Was this a wrong number? The NASA engineer's tone turned somber as he delivered a devastating blow. "Unfortunately, I have to bring you some news," he said. Just 2 days ago, on December 26th, Gorbachev officially announced the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Your country no longer exists. The words hit them like a physical blow. Their minds went blank, and they stared at each other in stunned, suffocating silence. After a long pause, Krikalev erupted in anger. "You are lying," he roared. "You shameless Americans. That is absolutely impossible. Our country cannot just dissolve." He simply refused to believe it. But the NASA engineer remained remarkably calm. He told them to stop deceiving themselves, pointing out that they must have realized something was terribly wrong. "Why hasn't anyone contacted you for so long?" the engineer asked. "Why hasn't anyone brought you home? Doesn't that tell you something?" The harsh logic silenced them. They had no rebuttal. The NASA representative then revealed his true purpose. He stated that NASA was willing to cooperate with them. They could send up vital supplies and even arrange to bring the two cosmonauts back to Earth. But there was a massive catch. The condition for their rescue was that they had to immediately defect and join the United States. Hearing this, Krikalev was consumed by absolute fury. He was about to unleash a tirade of curses, but Volkov quickly stopped him. Volkov shook his head, signaling him to stay quiet, and told the American, "Let us discuss this. Contact us again tomorrow." And with that, the transmission was cut. Furious, Krikalev turned on Volkov, accusing him of treason. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Do you really want to negotiate with them? Are you planning to betray our motherland?" Volkov looked out the observation window at the brilliant blue earth, so tantalizingly close, and sighed deeply. "I don't have any ulterior motives," he replied sadly. "I just want to go home." He explained that even if they wanted to, they couldn't trust the Americans. The US and the Soviet Union were fierce adversaries, representing entirely different factions during the Cold War. Trusting the enemy was almost impossible. Volkov reasoned that even if they accepted the deal, there was no guarantee the Americans would actually rescue them. And if they defected, they would truly lose their home forever, forever branded as traitors to their country. They resolved that even if no one ever came to save them, they would never betray their homeland. The next day, the NASA representative reached out again, fully expecting the desperate men to accept the deal. Instead, they delivered a flat, uncompromising refusal. They declared that even if they were left to die in space, they would never betray their country. It was a decision of unimaginable bravery, as they were effectively throwing away their only guaranteed ticket to survival. Days turned into weeks, and true to their fears, no one else contacted them. But an even deadlier crisis was looming. A supply vessel known as the Progress spacecraft was scheduled to deliver food and necessities to the station. It was an unmanned cargo ship, but it was heavily delayed. As the days dragged on, their provisions depleted rapidly. The terrifying reality set in. They might actually starve to death in orbit. Forced to ration heavily, they ate as little as possible, meticulously calculating every crumb to extend their lives. To make matters worse, the aging Mir station began breaking down. Normally, the Progress would bring replacement parts and repair tools. Without them, the cosmonauts were forced to cannibalize their own station, dismantling less critical components to patch up vital life support systems. It was a desperate, makeshift struggle for survival. To conserve power, they shut down every non-essential system, living in a dark, freezing, and terrifyingly silent metal tube. Just when they were pushed to the absolute edge of their physical and mental limits, a miracle occurred. The unmanned Progress supply ship finally arrived, bringing desperately needed food and supplies. It had suffered system failures along the way, causing the massive delay. But while it saved them from starvation, it offered no escape, as the cargo ship was not designed to return humans to Earth. Sometime later, while they were exercising, the radio crackled again. Expecting another annoying call from NASA, they were stunned to hear the Russian language. It wasn't the Americans, it was the Baikonur Cosmodrome, their original launch site. The people they had been praying to hear from had finally reconnected. But the voice on the radio was grim. He offered them one piece of good news and one piece of bad news, asking which they wanted first. Given their miserable situation, Volkov asked for the bad news, assuming things couldn't get any worse. The official confirmed what NASA had said. Their country had dissolved, though it had been reformed as Russia. However, the Baikonur Cosmodrome was now located in the newly independent nation of Kazakhstan. To launch a rescue mission, Russia would have to pay a massive rental fee for the launch pad, which they simply could not afford amidst their domestic political chaos. Therefore, no one was coming to get them. The cosmonauts were crushed, asking if they were just being abandoned. But then, Krikalev remembered the good news. The official explained that journalists had caught wind of their story. The press had dubbed them the last Soviets, and the resulting international media frenzy had put immense public pressure on the Russian government. Forced to act, Russia was now negotiating with foreign space agencies to figure out a way to bring them back. However, the timeline and success of these negotiations were entirely unknown. While a sliver of hope returned, their bodies were failing them. After spending so many months in zero gravity, they developed severe space sickness. Their muscles aggressively atrophied, and their bone density plummeted. The physical pain was excruciating, feeling as though their very bones were being sliced with knives. They tossed and turned every night, unable to sleep through the agony. But the psychological torment was infinitely worse. Trapped in a claustrophobic tin can with no guaranteed return date, they stared longingly out the window at the Earth. Home was right there, visibly rotating beneath them, yet entirely out of reach. This profound helplessness and crushing isolation triggered severe depression and vivid hallucinations. They were on the brink of complete mental collapse. Just as they were about to lose their minds, a strange voice came through the radio. It wasn't NASA or Baikonur. It was an Australian woman named Margaret. She was an amateur radio enthusiast who had heard about their plight on the news. Fascinated and deeply moved, she managed to tune her equipment to Mir's frequency. For the remainder of their isolation, Margaret became their ultimate psychological lifeline. She talked to them almost every single day. They discussed mundane, wonderful things like home-cooked meals, Australian culture, and the latest news on Earth. She even brought local high school students to the radio to chat with the real-life astronauts. This human connection was the only thing that kept Krikalev and Volkov tethered to sanity during their agonizing wait. The ordeal dragged on until March 1992. Krikalev, who had launched on May 18, 1991, had been in space for nearly a full year. Finally, the glorious news arrived. The negotiations were successful, and ironically, the agency that helped fund their rescue was none other than NASA. But this time, it was a formal, diplomatic cooperation, not a shady defection deal. On March 17, 1992, the Soyuz TM-17 spacecraft arrived to bring them back. The forgotten men of a vanished empire were finally coming home.